Hello everyone, my name is Hank Abramson. I'm coming to you from the offices of Henry Martin Law here in Frederick, Maryland, and today I want to talk to you about the 6 big things you need to think about before you start your own brewery. Alright, so you want to start a brewery. Very exciting, very ambitious project. I want to cover with you today 6 big things that you need to think about before you start the brewery operations. There's going to be a lot of other little things, some of which we'll cover in this video, some of which we'll cover in later videos. But today is just a big picture view of things that you will want to think about before you start your brewery. So the first thing to think about is whether you want to operate as a sole proprietorship, a partnership, or maybe through a limited liability entity. Now, if you're on your own and you just start business without doing anything else, you'll be operating as a sole proprietorship. If you're working with other people, you have other partners, then you may be working as a partnership without doing more. However, the sole proprietorship and the partnership has one major flaw, which is that there's no limited liability protection. In other words, any liabilities that you might incur through the operation of this business could jeopardize your personal assets. Things like your home, your car, your personal monies. Things like that could be subject to the business liabilities should you get sued and should a judgment be awarded against you, and that is a very big risk to take. Of course, you'll definitely want to get insurance either way, but insurance may not cover all the potential damages that you could incur through the operation. So one thing that people like to do is operate through a limited liability entity. Some examples of these entities are a C corporation, S corporation, or a limited liability company. The advantages and disadvantages of each can vary from state to state, but generally speaking, these entities allow you to operate your business and separate your business assets from your personal assets. So if there is a judgment against the business does something wrong, generally speaking, your personal assets will be protected from those liabilities. Limited liability protection is just that. It's limited. It's not total immunity. So if you somehow forfeit the corporate veil, you act with gross negligence or intentional acts, or you jeopardize the limited liability shield another way, like commingling personal assets with business assets, that shield can be gone. And so your personal assets may be exposed to those liabilities at that point. But aside from that, generally speaking, your business liabilities will be separated from your personal assets. So it's usually a good idea to think about operating as either a corporation or a limited liability company. You'll definitely want to talk to an attorney in your particular jurisdiction. We're here in Maryland and we can advise on Maryland law. But for example, if you wanted to start in Texas, you may want to consult with an advisor in Texas to learn more about how entities in Texas can protect you. All right, the second thing that you're going to want to think about is real estate. Where are you going to operate this brewery? Chances are you're not going to be able to operate it out of your basement of your home. You're going to need some commercial facility so that people can come through the door. Whether you have manufacturing operations, manufacturing and taproom operations, however you decide to start up, you're going to want a facility. Now the question is, are you going to buy that facility or are you going to lease that facility? If you're going to buy that facility, obviously you're going to need a lot of capital to purchase that facility, and there are all kinds of issues going into that. You're going to likely want title work to be done to make sure the title to that facility is okay before you purchase it. There may be environmental issues, especially if you're purchasing a property in an industrial zone or maybe even on a farm. You're likely going to want a survey to be done to make sure there's no encroachments or problems with the real estate. And so all those things need to be taken care of as part of the real estate purchase. Now the advantage of the real estate purchase obviously is that once you purchase that building, it's yours. You don't have to worry about a landlord making rules for you or potentially one day wanting another tenant in there and kicking you out. And so you kind of have a little bit more security potentially. Now the drawback of that also is now you've purchased a building. Should the business not work out after 2 or 3 or 4 years, you're going to have a building to sell and a major liability. So something to think about. You could lease and thereby you don't have the same liability, the permanent liability of owning that building. You have a limited time that you're under lease for. Although if you're going to be starting up a brewery with manufacturing operations, some heavy equipment, potentially a fancy tap room and costly other things, maybe a costly build out in that facility, you're probably going to want to hang on to it for a while, and people know where to go, where to find you. So you're probably not going to be wanting to move around every few years. So chances are when you sign a lease for that facility, you're going to want either a longer term lease or a short-term lease, but with a bunch of options so that you have the option to stay there for a good amount of time. Now, in your lease, you really need to be careful because landlords can put a lot of things in leases that can jeopardize how you operate or the rights they have to come into the facility to do work or to show other people the property. So you really want to be careful with the lease language and have an advisor look over that for you. But again, number 2 is looking at the real estate, making sure you find the real estate not only that fits your needs, but also that's zoned properly so that you can operate a commercial or manufacturing facility or whatever the terminology is in your particular neck of the woods. All right, number 3, and perhaps this should be number 1, capital, money. How are you going to start this thing up without any money? So maybe it's should be 1A, B, and C on this list. It found its way to number 3. Nevertheless, the importance cannot be overstated. You're going to need money to make this thing happen. You're going to have to buy your equipment. You're going to have to maybe purchase the real estate or lease the real estate. You're going to have to potentially pay employees and pay people on your staff to operate this brewery. How are you going to do it without any money? I represent lots of different clients that have started breweries, wineries, and distilleries, and I've seen it done a number of ways. You can personally fund the whole campaign if you're lucky enough to have that kind of money sitting around. I've seen third-party investors come in and fund a project. Aunt Sally and Uncle John fund the project, you know, family, friends, fools kind of situation. And sometimes it's just, you know, a bunch of guys that have been brewing out of their garage and they want to pull their money together and fund the project. One way or another, you're going to need that money, though, to buy the equipment, the real estate, pay the staff, and put it together. So you need to decide pretty early on how you're going to do that. And usually, especially if you're going to be bringing in outside investors or even investors that you already know, family or friends, you're going to want to put together a pretty good business plan so that they can see exactly what you're trying to do with this operation. You put your financial plan in there so that they can see that the financials are solid and you have an idea of what kind of money you're going to need over the next period of time so that the business doesn't run dry of money. It can stay afloat while you're brewing your beer. And so you put your business plan together, you talk to your family and friends, or maybe it's your partners or outside investors, and you put your money together. Now, there are a couple things you want to remember. You know, before you are open about letting people in as shareholders or equity holders into your particular entity, if you're starting up an entity and that's the way you're looking to drive money in, just be careful before you let people into the entity. It's like letting strangers into your house. Anything can happen. If they don't like the way you're running something, or they want a larger vote, or they want a larger share of the money for what you're giving away, you know, it may not be worthwhile having those folks in the entity. You could also set it up, instead of buying into the entity, you could set it up as a loan so that they get a return on investment, but at the same time, they're not actually into the entity. So there's a lot of different things to think about here. You also have to be careful of securities laws if you're an already established entity selling to third party, especially across state line investors, making sure they're accredited investors and everything else. So you really want to be careful about where the money's coming from, making sure you have a good idea of what resources and what type of money you need and what you're willing to give away in terms of either equity into the entity or a return on investment and interest rate for a loan. Other considerations like that. So you really do need to be careful on that one. All right, step 4, This is also very important, licensing and permitting. So you're definitely going to need to get your federal licensing through the TTB, as well as state and likely local licensing as well, depending on your jurisdiction and what you're trying to do. Without this licensing and permitting, things aren't going to go no matter how much you're ready to create your beer, no matter whether you have your money in line, your entity, and your real estate. Without the final okay from the federal government, as well as the state government, and likely the local government, you're not going to fly. So you really want to have that on your radar. Start getting ready for that early. Determine what kind of licensing and permitting you're going to need depending on the type of operation that you're going to have, and start filing that paperwork well ahead of time so that you can get your ducks in a row before you want to open your doors. All right, fifth. This is one of my favorites, intellectual property protection. It cannot be overstated how important this is for breweries, especially craft breweries. The core value of your business is going to come down to your recipes and your marks and your logos. Craft breweries are known by their creative names, not only for the business, but also for the brews. That's why a lot of times people are coming to you, or you've drawn their attention because they've heard about a beer called this crazy name and they're coming in to see you, or the brewery called a crazy name and they're coming in to see you. The recipes are just as important, because once they come to see you, they're not going to come back if they don't like how the beer tastes. All these things are important to lock down. So you want to protect your brand marks, your brewery name and your beer names and things like that through trademark protection. And I'll cover in a later video all the ins and outs of trademark protection. You may also be able to protect some of those designs and logos through copyright protection as well. You're going to want to protect your recipes through most likely trade secret, and that's a matter of establishing the rules, policies, and procedures for keeping these recipes a secret, confidential. So only the people that need to know do know. You really want to be careful about that. You want to make sure that you get the proper registrations, whether it's trademark or copyright, and that you have the formal procedures and policies in place to protect those trade secrets. Very important. All right, the sixth and final, but not the least important step is taking care of employees and contractors. Who are you going to have to work in this facility? Are you going to contract for help? Third-party contractor comes in and maybe helps you brew or helps you complete some other operations? Or are you going to have full-time or part-time employees, or some combination thereof? Either way, you want to make sure you're buttoned up. These folks are going to be in the facility, like we talked about in item number 5, locking up your intellectual property. You're going to want to make sure that the folks, whether they're employees or contractors, who have access to some of this intellectual property, especially someone like a brewmaster who's actually brewing the recipes and maybe even creating some of the recipes, you're going to want to make sure that's all locked up in a well-drafted either employment agreement or a contractor agreement, depending what type of individual, how you characterize them working for you. Now, whether the person is an employee or a contractor is not decided by you. It's decided by the federal government and the state government. Now, the federal government has approximately a 20-factor test to determine whether that person should be characterized as an employee or a contractor. And the more control you have over that person, the more likely it is that they're an employee and a contractor. And people can get into trouble by trying to characterize someone as a contractor rather than an employee, whether they do it intentionally or intentionally. Some businesses try to save on the withholdings and the burden of withholding taxes and insurance and so forth, and try to characterize this person as a contractor when they really aren't. And you don't want to do that. It's a bad mistake. Here in Maryland, the state of Maryland is very strict about who's an employee and a contractor, and I've seen clients audited on this issue before, and it's painful if you're doing it the wrong way. So certainly on the state level, check with a local advisor in your jurisdiction over the differences between employee and contractor. And on the federal level, visit the IRS website. They have a nice guide as to the factors that they consider between employee and contractor, and make sure you get it right the first time. All right, so those are the 6 big things you need to think about before you start your brewery and start your business operations. 1, your entity. 2, your real estate. 3, your capital. 4, your licensing and permitting. 5, intellectual property protection. And 6, employees and contractor issues. You're certainly encouraged to reach out to an advisor in your local area to learn more about the ins and outs of each of these particular areas. Here at Henry Martin Law, we help our clients start breweries, wineries, and distilleries and help them with all the business and intellectual property matters that they may encounter along the way. Thank you for joining us on this blog here today. This is episode number 1. We're excited to bring you more content in the future, and look out for our future videos. Thank you very much. I really hope you enjoyed the video today and learned a little something in the process. If you liked the video, please press the like button below, and please subscribe to our channel if you want to follow us.